patriarchal seat to symbolize no man should want this job. And if he doesn't have that attitude, then force him into it. And some of the better saints of the church have been the ones who've been forced into becoming bishops. And some of the worst ones are the ones who thought of it in terms of ego and personal worldly advancement. In any case, upon consecration as Bishop of Rome, he set upon the task of improving the worship and instruction of the church. So he began the process of the development of what we know as Gregorian chant. Now, some people think that he did the chant. No, he didn't. He took what existed and he encouraged everybody to learn it. And he began the process that was developed over a certain amount of time. So it's called Gregorian chant to distinguish it from Byzantine chant, from the chanting they use in the East, but both of them come from the same Jewish source. By the way, this is an aside, but I have a hypothesis that I haven't been able to verify that Jewish chant as we have it today has been highly influenced by Christianity, although it would never be admitted. So don't go looking for its origins in Judaism. You'll have, unless you know music, you'll have a hard time finding it. You'll stumble on all kinds of stuff. And I'm not sure that we can be assured that what we discover is actual. So in any case, Gregory set upon disciplining the clergy. Notice, disciplining the clergy, the ones who need the work of those who are up. So at the Reformation, the idea was get rid of those people, get rid of the priests, and then we won't have any problems. Well, then we set up other clergy in their place. Somebody's got to lead. I remember when I was in Episcopal Church Seminary, I heard of a bishop who had once been a professor of homiletics in an Anglican seminary. And all the seniors are required in Anglican seminaries to have a day in the daily prayers when they are required to preach. So instead of having your assignment, which when I was in there, thank God it was an assignment, bishop expected you to be ready. So he'd stand at the door of the church. Imagine if Father Mark did this at the door of the chapel of the church and just waited till we walked in and just picked one of us out at random and said, "You're up today." So that required one to read the lessons in advance and have a basic theme ready in his mind in case he got called on. So
that gives me an idea.
if you want to, it might be called a penance, Lenten discipline, folks. Be ready. In any case, he started with the clergy. He exposed and corrected scandalous behavior, forbade fees for church services, began the process of unifying many of the Western liturgies, that was bringing them in some sense of harmony. Began the process, didn't really accomplish it all. And he initiated a system for simplifying the Latin chant. He spent a significant amount of the church's treasuries assisting poor and indigent farmers and in ransoming captives. He also ordered the protection of the Jews and forbade their mistreatment. When in 593 the invading Lombards arrived at the gates of Rome to sack it, Gregory personally went out to face them down and to stave off the threat. And as I recall, he wasn't quite as successful as his predecessor Leo had been in doing something like that. He worked diligently to the end of his life, and one of his last acts of piety was to send a warm cloak to a poor bishop who had none and who was subjected to the winter cold. Reminds me of St. Martin of Tours. Gregory died in 604, having lived his life in fulfillment of what he expected of anyone holding his office. That is, he was, and I quote that motto of the popes, of the patriarchs of Rome, servant of the servants of God. It is said that Gregory coined this phrase. I think that probably he made it popular. It may have been around, but it's still, you get the point. A servant of the servants of God. St. Gregory the Great was one. So if we look back to some of the high points of his life, he converted as an adult. So he converted. He overdid the fasting. We can overdo these things. So we have to be careful. Super Orthodox. Yeah. So if you're an Orthodox priest and you're super Orthodox, like I said, you and I don't rank because you don't have a beard and I don't have a ponytail. So and the rest of you, I don't know. Just you didn't make it. So we want to be super Orthodox. So he overdid the fasting. We can overdo this, the faithfulness and set up our own kingdom, doing it our way. He was reluctant to be elevated. We should be reluctant to be known. Jesus said, your reward will be great if you don't have that, basically. I'm paraphrasing him. He reformed the clergy. He started at the top. When we expect something to change, we have to start with ourselves. But within the church, the clergy, we clergy know this. It starts with us. Remember, I've said clergy are like line officers in the American Civil War. They're out front of the soldiers. They're the ones that are getting shot at. And they better expect it unless they don't want to be up there. So you can expect it. You're Christians. You can expect it too. He aided the poor. And he lived with his Christianity till the end of his life. So St. Gregory. St. David of Wales, also bishop and confessor, who lived, we think, from 520 to 589. His feast day is the 1st of March. He was the son of a Celtic prince in Wales, and he's really, I think, the patron saint of Wales. He appears to have been a Christian from his youth, and he's noted for having, listen to this, he memorized the Psalter, the lessons of the ecclesiastical lectionary, and the divine offices. I mean, I'm amazed at someone who can memorize the Psalter, let alone those other two things. But he had it all memorized. And a lot of people didn't read in those days, and so it was imperative for the clergy to be able to do these things. If the all of them, yeah. All of them, plus the offices, plus the lectionary. So bishops used to be in the ancient church, bishops were selected from among those who had memorized the Psalter. So it was expected of them. I don't think we do that anymore, but if you do the offices faithfully all the time, eventually a lot of it will happen on its own. In any case, eventually he was ordained priest, but rather than enter the work of a parish priest, he retired to a monastery to learn under the influence of one St. Paulinus. This is not the Paulinus who started the conversion of Ireland. After several years with Paulinus, David began fervently to establish monasteries throughout Wales. It's said that he founded 12 monasteries and several churches. Actually, a lot in Wales, it's so popular, sort of like St. Patrick in Ireland. Everybody wants to say that the community started with the patron saint. So they attribute it to them, even though it may be questionable. I don't know. Might have founded more, who knows. At Menevia, he founded his main monastery where he and his monks lived under an austere rule. They performed manual labor, kept silence, and lived on a diet, get this, of bread, vegetables, salt, and water. Those seeking entrance into the community were required to wait at the monastery gate for 10 days to endure insults before being admitted into the community. So you imagine, if you come to the monastery and you want entrance and you want to join them, and they have the audacity to keep you outside and yell insults at you. Most of us would say, I don't have to put up with this stuff. I'm out of here. And that's what the idea. I watched we had a video at my parish in Wichita Falls, and we had a video in the library, and it was from an Orthodox Eastern Rite monastery up in the northeast. And the abbot was being interviewed, and he said, if you come here with problems, I guarantee you, and if you come here with the idea that you're going to get away from your problems, you're mistaken. And I guarantee you, it won't be long before the monastic life will bring out the worst in you. So we want to weed them out fast, quickly. So the idea is to weed us out. And most of us are so proud and arrogant, and I'm projecting on you. Forgive me, but most of us think that who has a right to tell me what God has said to me and what God is doing in me. The church does. Yes, ma'am.
So they had to stay silent unless there were hurling insults at people?
Yeah, if they defended themselves.
Unless you're sitting there insulting.
They just let it all out of it.
Yeah.
It's their duty for the day. Part of their discipline.
They went to confession, confessed to the abbot or the priest, whatever.
So that gives them a reason to go to confession.
Yeah, that's right.
So they did this right before confession.
Yeah. Anyway, they also kept a strict vigil of prayer from Friday evening until dawn on Sunday. I remember when I first became Orthodox, and met Eastern Rite people who thought Sunday was a day of fasting, and I couldn't figure out why, because it's not, the Western Rite, it isn't a day of fasting, but it is sort of, because we have a partial fast on Saturdays, and we practice pre-communion fast after Vespers on Saturday and Sunday morning. So technically you could argue maybe that's just something he was working on here. When Pelagianism resurfaced in Wales, he was a significant instrument in the suppression of this heresy. Pelagianism was a heresy that stressed, if you remember, almost everything in the church is antinomic, that is, two seeming opposites held in tension: faith and works. Faith is works. That's the truth. Faith in Christ is belief and works. Well, Pelagianism stressed works so much that the faith in Christ and God's working got lost. I'm not sure Pelagius said that. I've read one of his writings, and it doesn't sound like that's exactly what he's saying, but his thinking and the consequences of his thinking became popular under a successor of his named Celestius. And in any case, this was a heresy that didn't go away. It kept coming back and still does. So
Is it kind of analogous to just modern day secular humanism? I'm a good person, I do good things.
well, sort of, yeah. Yeah, I had a Protestant pastor in Wichita Falls who said that we Orthodox were semi-Pelagian. Yeah, and so I challenged him in an article. I wrote him a letter and I challenged him, and and he said, well, now, don't you believe in faith and works for your salvation? Well, what I realized was, after I read a catechism in Philip Schaff's series of books, and if any of you have done any studies, Philip Schaff, he was a Protestant in the 19th century who wrote a number of things. And he has a 3-volume set of writings of various churches and creeds and writings of various churches. And in there he has a catechism from an Orthodox clergyman who from the Eastern Europe doesn't understand how Lutherans and even Protestant Americans would understand what works means. So what the author was trying to say was that faith is living, it's active, we have to try to live it. And that's the only word he had for it was works. So faith and works. Well, we've all heard this baggage in the United States, and we knee-jerk to that phrase, you see. And I think that's what that pastor was doing. In any case, when this Pelagianism was the real problem, overemphasizing one aspect at the expense of the other. That's why heresy is always misleading, because it's partly true. But insofar as it's only partly true, it's not wholly true, and therefore it's not true at all. So,
Pelagianism is partly expressed in many different Christian faiths out there.
Yeah.
That bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
So they don't even know that that's what it was.
right, yeah. Or the opposite, save salvation by belief alone. All you got to do is believe, and you don't have to do a thing. Just do what you want. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat it, folks. We're cruising in.
The two pendulum swings.
Yeah. Anyway, he was elected to become bishop of the area near Menevia. He pastored his diocese and kept a strict monastic rule for a number of years. In 589, he knew that his death was near, and so he spoke these words to his monks and his people, and they've been passed down to us. Be joyful, brothers and sisters, keep your faith and do the little things that you have seen and heard with me. He reposed in Christ in that same year, 589. So he was a Christian from his youth. He submitted to learning from veterans of the Christian faith. He lived an austere life, learned how to pray, resisted current heresies, and sensed his impending death. Many of us don't want to resist current heresies, but they're out there. I've heard people say that's not even Christian to do that. Well, wrong. That's an American Christian concept. Don't say no to anybody. St. Patrick of Ireland, bishop and confessor, whom we think died in 461. We really don't have accurate dates for him. St. Patrick was born in England. Now, he's believed to have been of Romano-British origin, so we don't know whether he was a Celt, a Roman, or part of each. We don't know. His father was a deacon. His family was Christian. His grandfather was a priest, so he came from clerical families. As a young man, he didn't pay much attention, St. Patrick didn't pay much attention to living the Christian faith, though he'd been brought up in it. So I'm in pretty good company. Not that I'm a saint, mind you, but I'm in good company. It's nice to know that much. But remember, when we're talking about patron saints, people who understand us, these people understand the likes of my kind. In 403, when he was about the age of 14, he was taken captive by Irish raiders and made a slave in the service of a pagan chieftain in Ireland. He was probably indentured in Antrim in Ulster, which is, for those of you who don't know, is the province in the north, what is now called Northern Ireland, although it doesn't include all the counties. In Ireland, they call it the north of Ireland. They don't call it Northern Ireland. So remember that if you ever go over there, the north of Ireland. So in any case, it also said he was in service in Mayo in the West, and as I mentioned, with St. David, St. Patrick as well, everybody wants to attribute their churches to Saints Bridget or St. Patrick. So we don't know where he was from. You know, there are all kinds of places, shrines and things in Ireland where he might have been. In any case, he was relegated to watching the chieftain's sheep herds and remembering the prayers he'd been taught. He learned to spend his hours praying. So while he was out there doing his slave work, he was learning to pray. After 6 years, he managed to escape, taking flight upon a ship bound for Gaul. There he was able to return to his family, stopped off in England. He was remained with his people for a short time, but he also began experiencing visions in which strange voices called out to him from Ireland, begging his return. Instead of going directly there, he went to Gaul instead, where the Celtic people still were prevalent. There he received clerical training and was ordained a priest. He came under the influence of St. Germanus of Auxerre, who was soon to consecrate Patrick bishop and return him for the missionizing of the Irish people. Once he returned to Ireland, he fell in with Leary, High King of Ireland. So he knew to get in with the High King and then you had access to everybody. And understand the High King in Ireland was sort of like a chief among the Plains Indians in America. He really wasn't a leader. He was a leader, but he wasn't an absolute leader. He wasn't a despot, as the word goes. So Leary was influential in Patrick having access to a lot of places in Ireland. As a result of his missionary work, the town of Armagh, which is in the north, was designated as the primatial see of Ireland and has been for a long time. So the north is probably where he was. Certainly in his lifetime, the conversion was not completed. So regardless of what people tell you, not all of Ireland converted under St. Patrick. It took others to come along and do that. But it made major headway under his leadership. From then it was up to other missionaries. And anyway, he started the process, or helped start the process of conversion of one of the most violent people in Europe. So they were very ruthless people, and yet they feared the Druid types. I think I've told you this before. And the Celtic monastics emulated the Druids, and the people were afraid to touch them or lay a hand on them. They might kill someone else brutally, but they wouldn't touch Druids. So there's where you use the culture to your advantage, you see. In any case, because of this selfless work, he's viewed as the patron of the Irish people. He learned to pray in his idle moments. So he had idle moments. That's when he learned to pray. And he appealed to the hierarchy when he received visions. And his knowledge of the culture was to begin his work of conversion. So keep that in mind. Lastly, St. Benedict of Nursia, abbot, from 480 to 547. St. Benedict was born in the Italian town of Nursia, which is located in the mountains east of Rome. He's traditionally believed to have been born in the year 480. Little is known of his early life, though it seems he was taught the Christian faith from his youth. When he was in his late teens, sometimes in the late 490s, his parents sent him to Rome to receive a more formal education. By the way, you notice a lot of these people get formal education, and a lot of the saints you read got formal education. A lot of them didn't mention that. But I remember when I went to the Episcopal Church Seminary and I came home to visit my home parish that sent me to seminary, I think my middle year, my second year, And I was having a conversation with a priest, and he said, we're going to have to expunge you from all that knowledge. And all these saints didn't have that knowledge expunged. They had expunged. They had it incarnated. So it was used. I've recently been reread and am currently rereading books by Peter Kraft, a Roman Catholic theologian, and I don't theological positions, but his understanding of use of Plato and Aristotle and things like that is very, very helpful. And he shows how the church takes these things and utilizes them. Well, St. Benedict did the same thing. And it was there that he began, during that time he was in Rome, he began to be disillusioned with Rome and desire a deeper spiritual life. So we don't know whether his disillusionment with the city of Rome led to his wanting spiritual things or whether spiritual things led to his seeing and becoming disillusioned with Rome. We don't know. At the age of 20, he relocated into the mountains east of Rome, where, like St. Gregory, he entered more intently into the disciplines of prayer and solitude. We don't know how long he was there, but he quickly gained attention for his spiritual progress. This brought him undue attention and many visitors and left him with no solitude and little time for the prayers he so dearly loved. So it reminds me of St. Hilarion, who was always trying to run away, and he was always being forced to organize people in monastic communities. When Benedict could endure the attention no longer, he retired into the mountains, further into the mountains, resuming another attempt at solitary life. It was in the mountains at Subiaco that he met a monk named Romanus, who was in a nearby monastery. I think Romanus became his spiritual father, but I don't know this. Romanus located him in a cave up on the side of a mountain, which required his food and needs to be met by hoisting it up the side of the mountain. That way people couldn't get up there to bother him. So when you're an introvert and you want to be left alone, don't feel bad. It's a saintly behavior.
Find a high cave.
Yeah, that's find a high cave and say, stay away. Enter at your own risk. Well, in any case, Saint Romanus regularly brought him bread and water. Bread and water. You can imagine a diet like that. We want food, real food. It wasn't too long, regardless of that, before monks began flocking to him, and he was left with no choice but to instruct them in the spiritual life. He began to organize them into functional monastic communities, and it's believed that he founded 12 different monastic communities, all of which lived under his guidance. The monks were instructed in discipline, prayer, the 8 canonical offices, and work. And it's a stereotype that Benedict says in his rule that the Christian life is to be lived through prayer and work. He doesn't. What he suggests is concepts. He suggests concepts that if you follow them, you will do prayer and you will have work. But nowhere does he say prayer and work. And that's a stereotype. It's sort of like the other one. The old one, it was popular in England, that the Benedictine rule said that when a young monk steps out of line, you send 2 stout monks after him to convince him of the error of his ways. Everybody likes to quote that one, but Benedict didn't say that. It's not in his rule. It's something that arose in England and became very popular there among Benedictines, yes.
So that's that saying, Laura, that was Laura, he never actually
Yeah.
wrote that down.
Yeah, he never did. Yeah, it's a stereotype. We can stereotype these people. That's why I took these biographies and, believe it or not, cut them short, simplified them to get rid of a lot of the stereotypical stories that go around them. In any case, this was to begin the time when he wrote his famous rule. And the Western Rite tradition, the offices are based upon the rule of Saint Benedict, both in the Gregorian tradition and in the English tradition. So they're based upon the rules of St. Benedict. And in fact, if you really want to understand the offices, you should read them as St. Benedict talks about them in order to understand them better. But in any case, he didn't create the rule. That's another stereotype. There was something called the rule of the master, which most scholars now believe was predated Benedict's rule, because there are parts of it where Benedict quotes in the Latin almost word for word large sections of the rule of the master, but he honed it. And he made it more applicable, he simplified it, and he made it more applicable to the monks that served under him. And so therefore, the form he has, yeah, he did, but it has an older origin. So in any case, His ministry was attended by repeated miracles. He cured the sick, fed the hungry, and always expected his monks to emulate his piety. So he set the standards. Around 542, he received a premonition of his impending death, but it wasn't until 547 that he knew the year to be at hand. 6 days before his death, he told his monks that he was soon to leave them, and he ordered them to dig his grave. Can you imagine having to see your grave dug out there alongside your house, and you see it every day for a couple of weeks or so? I don't know. That reminds me of the video of the priestly order of the Roman Catholic Church, and they would be buried in unmarked graves. And I thought, how sad to be forgotten completely. They don't even know where you're buried. But in Orthodoxy, what do we say? Memory eternal. So that's all that really matters, and that drives the point home. Okay, shortly thereafter, he was stricken with fever. On his last day of life, he went to the church, received the sacrament of the body and blood of the Lord for the last time. Supported by several of his brethren, he died with his hands upright, saying his last prayers. He died standing on his feet, and they were holding him. And there used to be a statue out at Monte Cassino, out in the ground. I think it was ruined in World War II, but it showed him standing there and two monks holding him up, and he was in the Orans position. So that relates to that moment. He was buried beside his sister, Saint Scholastica, and he reposed in Christ, we think, in 547. So he learned Christianity from his youth. He began to desire the deeper life, even after living maybe indifferently. He initiated the process. He lived in solitude, but instructed visitors and sensed his impending death. How many of these people understood when they were going to die? I'm not sure I want to know, other than maybe to prepare myself, which, I don't know. I need a lot of work. Yes, sir.
If your child is making noise, you guys can just take them out and bring back in.
In summary, these people, if you summarize these four saints, they were exposed to Christianity at a young age. They used early exposure and secular training in their Christian quests. They were reluctant to be elevated, several of them. They aided the poor or the downtrodden. It's one of the same. Is it St. Basil's rule where they created a hospital for the poor and the downtrodden? And so that's really,
He's celebrated in medical history for this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They submitted to authority. We have authority structure in the church, and it's historically been the case that we submitted to authority. One of my favorite examples is the Roman Catholic St. Francis of Assisi. A lot of people know this, but he created a version of the Benedictine rule that was tailor-made for his followers. And in the rule, he forced every monk to be under an authority, somebody else as his personal authority. So Francis was the head of the order, so really it was under him. But Francis then realized he was being a hypocrite by not doing that himself. So he took one monk who was one of his favorites and said, from now on, you will hear my confessions and you will be my spiritual father. The guy said, no, wait a minute, I didn't bargain for this. And Francis said, that's too bad. See, I like that story because it drives home to us the importance of being in the authority structure of the church. And it protects us. They each lived a life of prayer, and they respected but were not limited to the cultures in which they worked. So remember that. We are Orthodox Christians who happen to be Americans rather than Americans who happen to be Orthodox Christians. That's what we have to learn. Now, the next time I'm going to look at the 40 holy martyrs of Sebasti, St. Chad of Lichfield, St. Gregory of Nyssa. Do we have him up? Is he one of the ones up there? And St. Cuthbert. Two of them are Celtic saints.
You did two of them today, St. Gregory and
Yeah.
St. Benedict.
Yeah, I'm trying to cover them.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think I've covered maybe one or two others. Any case, any questions?
Oh, and St. Patrick.
Yeah, and St. Patrick. Yes, sir.
Is there a good Orthodox source just on St. Benedict and his life or his rules that's not the entire academic thing, but maybe like a distilled version or, like just a average person reader?
Well, I don't know if it's not Orthodox, it's Roman Catholic, but there's a book, I have it in my library. It's this thick, but it's different sections, like one, a history of early monasticism, and then it has his rule in Latin and English, and then it has something on his life, and then something else, I can't remember what it was. So they incorporate that into this big volume. It's called The Rule of Benedict, I think it's called. I don't remember who published it, or who put it together. But anyway, that's the only thing I can think of that I would recommend. The chapter on his life is good.
St. Vladimir Press has in their popular patristic series, has Gregory's biography of St. Benedict, which is
That's right.
super
right.
fun to read anyways, but that's the,
Well, if you may remember, as St. Scholastica, all we have of her came from St. Gregory.
yeah.
That's all we know. So St. Benedict didn't say anything about her, and St. Gregory did. So yeah, that's right. Read St. Gregory's. I think we have that volume in the 38 volumes of the Church Fathers in the library. Probably borrow that one and read it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that. All right. Thank you. See you next time.
Very good. It's tomorrow.